When we talk about UFO reports, the question always arises, are they real? Most of the time, we only have one or two witnesses claiming to have seen something unexplainable, like a UFO or an extraterrestrial being. This often leaves us skeptical, questioning the truth behind such accounts. But today, we bring you something different. The Varginha case in Brazil goes far beyond one or two witnesses. We're talking about an entire town involved. Supposedly, an extraterrestrial spacecraft crashed in the region, and its occupants were left wandering around, interacting in ways that left a profound mark on the town's collective memory. In this video, we'll explore 7 accounts tied to the incident. Some come from direct testimonies of Varginha residents, while others are stories pieced together from details shared by several people who preferred to remain anonymous. Get ready to uncover one of the most intriguing UFO cases ever recorded. I am the File Keeper, and welcome to my archive. It was the early hours of January 13th, 1996. Yuriko and I were at the farm we looked after, near the BR 491 highway in Varginha, Minas Gerais. Everything seemed peaceful until a loud noise echoed across the property, startling our cattle. The cows ran frantically across the pasture, which immediately put me on alert. I got up and went to the window to see what was going on. I thought it might be a predator or even cattle rustlers. But when I looked up at the sky, what I saw left me in shock. There was a large grey object hovering over the pasture. It made no sound, had no lights, but was surrounded by a dense white smoke, almost like a fog. I called Yuriko, who had been watching television. He came to the window and froze when he saw the same thing I did. The object was enormous, about the size of a minibus, and seemed to be descending lower and lower. Something in its structure appeared to be moving, but it was hard to make out due to the smoke. We watched it for about 40 minutes, until it slowly drifted away toward the Fernão Dias highway and disappeared into the horizon. The silence that followed was unsettling. We've never seen anything like it, either before or after that night. In the early hours of January 13th, 1996, I was driving along the Fernão Dias highway near the town of Três Corações in Minas Gerais. The sky was clear and the journey uneventful until something caught my eye. Through the windshield, I saw a strange object falling from the sky. It was elongated, cigar-shaped, with no wings, propellers, or any features resembling an aircraft. Its lights flickered irregularly, and it appeared to be rapidly losing altitude. The crash seemed to occur somewhere between the cities of Varginha and Três Corações. Intrigued, I decided to take a side road to investigate. When I reached the area, I found debris scattered everywhere. The object, roughly the size of a school bus, was completely destroyed, surrounded by scorched marks on the ground. The smell in the air was unbearable, a mix of ammonia and rotten eggs, and it clung to my nostrils. Amidst the wreckage, I found a curious piece. It looked like aluminum, but was incredibly lightweight, almost like a feather. When I tried bending it, it returned to its original shape, as if it were made of some unknown material. I was so absorbed in examining it that I didn't notice the arrival of others. Armed military personnel suddenly appeared, shouting at me to leave. Frightened, I got back in my car and drove away. Later, I stopped at a gas station to collect myself, but the night was far from over. About half an hour later, a group of men entered the diner where I was. They knew everything about me: my name, my profession, and even personal details like my family members' names. In a threatening tone, they ordered me to forget what I had seen and never speak of it again. At that moment, I realized this was no ordinary event. It was something far greater and more mysterious than I could have imagined. On the morning of January 20th, our phone at the fire department wouldn't stop ringing. Residents were clearly frightened, reporting the presence of a strange creature roaming a wooded area dividing two neighborhoods in the region. Some said it resembled an animal, but its behavior was odd. It seemed scared, cried out loudly, and emitted a high-pitched sound, almost like a wail. I was one of the firefighters dispatched to the scene. When we arrived, the situation was tense. The woods were dense, and groups of locals stood at a distance, watching. It was immediately clear that something unusual was happening. Part of the reinforcement came in a truck from the Army Sergeant's School, the ESA, in Tres Corações. We had never worked with them on anything like this before, which in itself was suspicious. They divided us into teams, and some personnel were armed, which raised my concern. Our priority was to investigate and contain the situation, but the Army's presence suggested there was more to it. We entered the woods, guided by the reports and the strange sounds echoing through the trees. Then we heard 3 gunshots. The sound sliced through the air, and we immediately knew something had been found. Minutes later, the soldiers emerged from the woods, carrying 2 black bags. One was completely still, as if it held something inanimate, but the other, it moved. It was impossible not to notice. As they passed by us toward the truck, I heard a peculiar sound coming from the moving bag. It was a low, constant hum, eerily similar to the buzzing of a swarm of bees. That sound sent chills down my spine. It didn't seem natural for any ordinary animal, and the soldiers' stern expressions only deepened my unease. The bags were quickly loaded onto the ESA truck and placed inside wooden crates. No one gave us any explanations. I asked the Army officer what was going on, but he simply ordered us to stay back. The operation was carried out in absolute silence, with all civilians cleared from the area. Even after all this time, that sound still echoes in my memory. What exactly did they carry on that truck? It was an ordinary afternoon, around 3 o'clock, and I was heading home with my sister Valkyria and our friend Katia. We had just finished cleaning a house and decided to take a shortcut through a vacant lot, bordered by tall walls on both sides. I was walking ahead, moving quickly, when something in the tall grass caught my eye. Suddenly, I froze. My heart felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. There, among the plants, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. It was a being I could never describe as anything from this world. Terrified, I thought I was staring at the devil himself, and I let out a scream that echoed through the silence of the lot. Startled by the noise, the creature turned its head toward me. Valkyria and Katia realized something was wrong and ran to my side. That's when they saw it too. It stared at us for a few seconds, though those moments felt like an eternity. The creature was crouched, as if trying to hide. It looked frightened but gave off an unbearable stench, a mix of ammonia and sulfur so strong it made me nauseous. Its body was small, no taller than 1.4 meters, and its skin was brown and oily, as if covered in a slimy substance. Its head was disproportionately large for its thin body, marked by protrusions and visible dark veins. The eyes. Those eyes were enormous, red, and at least 3 times the size of a human's. There was no nose, just 2 small holes, and its mouth was a simple slit, unmoving and expressionless. Looking into that face felt like staring at something that shouldn't exist. As soon as I locked eyes with it, panic overtook me. Valkyria and I bolted, screaming, convinced we had seen the devil himself. After running a few meters, we realized Katia wasn't with us. When we turned back, we saw her still there, frozen in place, as if paralyzed. We rushed back to get her. As we approached, we noticed Katia and the creature were staring at each other, as if there was some kind of connection between them. She seemed to be in a trance, unable to move or react. My sister and I practically dragged her away from that being. Later, after we calmed down, Katia told us something that gave me chills. She said the creature had communicated with her, not with words, but through thoughts. According to her, she heard it speak in perfect Portuguese, saying it was scared, feverish, and needed help. When we got home, we were still in shock. My mother immediately noticed something was wrong. We were pale, crying, our hands and legs trembling. We stammered as we tried to explain what we had seen, but all we could say was that we had seen the devil. My mother decided to go to the lot to check for herself. About 25 minutes later, she returned. There was no sign of the creature, but she found something that confirmed our story. On the wall, there was a footprint with 3 bifurcated toes, and the smell, that ammonia stench, still lingered, so strong that it stuck to her nose for days, even after trying to wash it off with soap and alcohol. Later, a construction worker nearby told us the firefighters had been there and taken the strange creature. This only reinforced the feeling that what we saw was something beyond explanation. It was the night of January 20th, 1996, a night that will forever remain etched in my memory. My partner, Marco Eli Cherez, and I were on patrol in an unmarked car belonging to the military police's intelligence unit. Our assignment was to find the creature responsible for the uproar in the region. Reports were pouring in from all directions, and the Hardimandere area seemed to be the focal point. Around 8 p.m., while driving through the neighborhood, something unusual caught our attention in the woods. A strange figure was partially concealed among the trees. Marco didn't hesitate. He got out of the car and approached the creature. The moment he grabbed it, tension filled the air. The creature was small, but terrifying, with a frail body, oily skin, and an almost unbearable stench, like a mix of ammonia and sulfur. Marco managed to restrain it, but not without consequence. It scratched his arm as it struggled to break free. Despite this, the creature seemed weak, as if it was injured or sick. I watched the scene unfold from inside the car, unable to look away. The creature didn't resist much, emitting only a low, plaintive sound, almost like a whimper of pain. Once Marco subdued it, he carefully placed it in the back seat of the car. He was visibly shaken, but managed to stay composed. We decided to take it to a nearby health clinic. It was clear that the being was injured, and we thought it best to hand it over to medical authorities. However, when we arrived, we were met with disbelief. The staff refused to assist, claiming they had no means to handle something like that. With no other option, we headed to the regional hospital. By the time we got there, the atmosphere was already unusual. A section of the hospital appeared to have been cordoned off, and we were able to transfer the creature there. We weren't given many details about what would happen next, only reassurances that they would take care of it. After handing over the creature, we were dismissed. We left the hospital in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Both Marco and I were trying to wrap our heads around what had just happened. That night was a turning point. This wasn't just a bizarre incident. It was something far bigger, something none of us were prepared to face. Even now, I can't forget the creature's unsettling presence and the haunting look in its eyes. It was early February 1996 when Marco Eli Cherez, a young 23-year-old military police officer, came to see me. He appeared worn out, complaining of intense pain and a constant feeling of unwellness. As a doctor and lieutenant in the military police, I was accustomed to handling a variety of cases, but his situation intrigued me from the start. In the first consultation, I noticed that he had an abscess in one of his armpits, a boil. It seemed like something simple to treat. I performed a drainage procedure on February 7th, a routine surgical intervention. Marco seemed to respond well at first, but just a few days later, on the 11th, he returned with more severe symptoms. High fever, widespread body pain, and fatigue he described as overwhelming. We decided to admit him immediately, but his condition worsened rapidly. On the 13th, Marco was transferred to the ICU of the regional hospital. Despite all medical efforts, he didn't make it. On February 15th, Marco passed away unexpectedly and devastatingly. The official cause was acute septicemia. a widespread infection in the body. What caught my attention, along with the other doctors involved in the case, was the speed and severity with which the disease progressed. It was unusual, to say the least, that a healthy young man could be overtaken so quickly by an infection that began with something as trivial as a boil. At the time, I had no idea what could have caused such an infection in Marco. However, weeks after his death, I heard reports about his involvement in the police operation that allegedly led to the capture of an unidentified creature in Varginha. According to the information that came to me, Marco was one of the officers who captured the creature with his own hands. During the process, it supposedly scratched his arm or armpit. At the time, he didn't pay much attention to the injury, as it seemed superficial. However, it's possible that this was the moment when something unusual entered his system. Something unknown to us, but which led to his condition progressing at an extremely rapid pace. It was a peaceful night on April 29th, 1996. It had been a little over 3 months since my daughters, Liliane and Valkyria's terrifying encounter with that creature in the vacant lot. We thought the worst was behind us, but around 10:30 p.m., our peace was shattered. A black car parked in front of our house. 4 well-dressed men in dark suits got out. They were strangers to us, and from the way they walked, they had a serious and determined demeanor. They came straight to the gate, and before I could even ask what they wanted, they entered without waiting for an invitation. Once inside our house, they seemed uneasy, as if they didn't want to stay long. One of them spoke while the others remained silent. He was the one who led the conversation. They started by asking Liliane and Valkyria to describe what they had seen that afternoon. The girls recounted everything again. The strange creature with oily skin and red eyes that had stared at them in the lot. While they spoke, one of the men wrote everything down in a notebook without saying a word. After hearing the girls out, they began asking me direct questions. They wanted to know if the house was ours, where I worked, what my daughter's dreams were. Then, the man leading the conversation revealed his true intent. He said they were there to make us an offer. In a nearly threatening tone, he said we had the opportunity to change our lives. To do so, all Liliane and Valkyria had to do was go on television and deny everything. He wanted them to publicly declare that they had never seen anything, that the entire story was just a misunderstanding. I still remember his words clearly. "You have a gold mine in your hands, something you could never imagine. Just do what we're asking." When I asked if they could leave a phone number or something that would allow me to think over the offer, he was firm. "We will contact you. Don't worry." And just like that, without allowing any time for a reaction, they stood up and left, leaving behind a feeling that we were being pressured by something far larger than we could understand. After that visit, I felt a mixture of fear and indignation. I didn't know who those men were or where they came from, but the way they acted made me believe they wanted us to lie and discredit the story. However, my daughters decided to stand by their word. They were absolutely sure of what they had seen that day. It was a difficult decision, especially because, by refusing their offer, we not only missed out on the promised money, but also faced years of hardships. Liliane and Valkyria became well known in the town, and unfortunately, were mocked for a long time. Still, they never wavered in their conviction. They know what they saw, and that certainty is something no one will ever be able to erase. Thank you for watching this video. The Varginha case is filled with countless other accounts and mysteries still waiting to be explored, and we may revisit them in the future. Before we wrap up, I have one more interesting fact for you. Just a year after the Varginha incident, another major UFO-related event occurred in Brazil. But ahead of getting into that, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring more intriguing stories to you. Now, back to the story. In the year following Varginha, a retired colonel would break 20 years of silence. revealing details about another famous UFO incident in Brazil, Operation Saucer. Click on the related video to find out more.